With the arrival of Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4, we, the fanbase and theory crowd, have learned an absolutely mind-boggling amount about the characters, themes, and future direction of this story. Long-standing theories have been crushed, chapter structures have been subverted, and we were given way more to chew on than I think anyone could have reasonably expected. With Chapter 4 in particular, a much darker side to the story has started brewing, and despite us still just being halfway through the game by the end of Chapter 4, by the way, does this mean Toby will give us Chapter 8? So many big reveals have been made that it took me a while to even figure out where I want to start. That said, the secret sections of these two chapters reveal things about Kris that I find
very, very interesting.
In previous chapters, there was a certain man behind a certain tree associated with a certain egg, which we really didn't know what to make of. Don't get me wrong, we still don't really know what to make of it, but what we've learned, and we have learned a lot, points in the direction of Kris having a much darker backstory than we previously thought. A backstory which, from what I can tell and guess, is looking very similar to the backstory of a certain other knife-wielding character. Now, before I continue, and I'll only say this once, spoiler alert. If you have not played these newest chapters of Deltarune, either pause the video or cover your ears and scream as loud as you can, now. With that said, join me as we take a leisurely walk through the most elusive secrets of these new chapters and explore the newborn question, what exactly happened to Kris? To start with, I'll go through the relevant info in each of the two new chapters, starting with Chapter 3. Chapter 3 begins during the night of the sleepover at the Dreamer residence, where Kris, Susie and Ralsei find themselves in a brand new dark world led by the charismatic TV Tenna, who offers a number of challenges. The first somewhat big reveal that's made happens when Ralsei goes into a very explicit description of what dark worlds actually are. Susie naively tries to invite him to the festival, taking place in hometown the next day, but of course he can't. And after some prodding, he's forced to reveal the true nature of dark worlds. Like he says, dark worlds are what happens when it becomes darker than dark. When a room filled with conventional items gets dark, things become indistinct, and your mind plays tricks on you. But what if we could take away the light that wasn't there? What if it got even darker? Well, that's how a dark world is born, apparently. Inanimate objects take on a life of their own, and you enter into some sort of dream world. It's sort of like a make-believe world, but also real in a much more fundamental way. As we progress through this chapter, we participate in Tenna's various challenges, collecting keys, doing cooking shows, reuniting lovers, playing in a band, and a host of other family-friendly activities. You're getting a little crazy there, Susie. For the purposes of this video though, what's most important is what happens if you get to the infamous Egg Room. Like previous chapters, the Egg Room is a secret room involving three key elements: a tree, an egg, and a certain man hidden behind the tree. Unlike previous chapters, finding this place in Chapter 3 is incredibly convoluted and frankly, random. Almost as though someone were trying very hard to hide it from us. After busting our asses off though, when we get there, Kris is alone in the same kind of 8-bit video game world that Tenna's minigames took place in. However, not only do they have their normal overworld body, they're also wearing their overworld clothes. A sign reads, "Welcome to Man Country." Like others before me, I first of all have to point out how much this whole vibe reminds me of games in the old haunted game creepypasta trope. You know, like Ben Drowned or Sonic.exe, classics like that. And the background music, which also plays in all the previous Egg Rooms, is apparently a fan-made soundtrack Toby made for the game Yume Nikki, which, if you know anything about that game, you'll know why it's worth mentioning as well. Now, there are these 6 highly pixelated Rudens here, you know, those playing card characters from Chapter 1. One asks if Kris has come to play with them, and another states they've gotten rather big. Have you been working out? I guess you grew up. Well, stop that. Another one says, copies are monochrome, but you colored each of us in with care. Maybe the pink ace was suspicious. I'm not sure what to make of the last statement, but the first Ruden mentioning Kris's growing up already hints at one of the points I want to make. Namely that this segment is very tightly connected with something in Kris's past, his real past. When we move over to the left, another sign says, "Welcome to Forgotten Island." This island is a World Heritage Site. Once again, World Heritage Site could be an allusion to Kris's past, the idea being that this island is the last remnant of something from that time. In my opinion, though, the most interesting dialogue we get in this area comes from this Ruden down here, who's in the process of looking through a pair of binoculars.
"I'm trying to see as far as I can, but it doesn't look too good. Talk about lousy real estate. I sense nothing but evil coming from that place."
The Ruden then leaves, allowing us to look. What we see looks like it's either a totally plain field of grass, or perhaps the bark of a tree. I think the latter is supported by the reference to lousy real estate, since trees blocking one's view is a pretty stereotypical homeowner complaint. The orange Ruden says, "We are the 7 flying aces. To cheat at cards, you copied 7 aces. It didn't work well. We got lost in the couch and ended up here. There aren't 7? Well, you named us. If you were good at counting cards, you wouldn't have needed to cheat." Finally, the 6th ace says that someone was looking for Kris, but it doesn't remember who. Did you try behind the tree? It seems like these characters are darkeners created from a set of fake playing cards Kris created as a kid, which got lost in the couch, given life when Chapter 3's Dark Fountain was opened. The main event, though, can be found if we go all the way up. Here, we find Chapter 3's Egg Room. As always, there is a man behind the tree, but this time we learn a lot more than we have previously. "Well, spring changed to summer, and summer changed to cold, and sure enough, I am the Forgotten Man. Will you forget me too?" If we answer yes, then the man simply disappears. But if we say no, he goes on to explain that Kris has forgotten him many times before, and then tells a story. "Once upon a time, the whole world looked like this. The world changed, society was developed. The earth was covered in water. Dinosaurs appeared, an ice age. In any case, this is the only place left I can talk. But one day, this island will disappear too." The meaning of this monologue could be similar to the sign about the World Heritage Site. Something happened in Kris's past, but in the meantime, things have changed, and it's been forgotten. He then asks us if we want to meet again, and if we say yes, he explains his schedule. It's been pointed out that this schedule seems to point to each of the chapters we've been through so far, the descriptions being references to the locations of the Egg Room in Chapter 1, 2, 4, and probably 5. He then gives us the egg and makes a direct reference to Deltarune before disappearing. And once we leave, we're suddenly back to the green room, as if nothing happened. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, the unusually hidden nature of the Egg Room in Chapter 3 is particularly interesting, especially when you consider how much more information we get from the Forgotten Man than we did in previous chapters. If we assume that a tree is what was blocking our view through the binoculars, then there's already a clear pattern forming. Everything related to the Forgotten Man and his tree is hidden and concealed. Some kind of force clearly doesn't want Kris to see or learn about it. And when we combine that with the connection to Kris's past in these segments, one very clear idea shines forth, to my mind at least. Repression. Something from Kris's past is being concealed and repressed, only showing up in the subtlest of ways. Not only is the Egg Room hidden, and not only is the Forgotten Man forgotten, we also have the option of answering yes when he asks if we'll forget him. If we do, he immediately disappears. We have to push through every hurdle imaginable to get even the slightest bit of information here. And if any of you are long-time viewers of this channel, you may not be surprised that this pattern reminds me very much of another game. Another game involving a young, quiet, knife-wielding character in a stereotypical Western suburb who represses something that happened relating to a tree, and who spends a lot of their time on adventures in a dreamlike world of escapism, only to rediscover long repressed segments of their past every now and then. 2nd of March 2014. I've had a plan for a game for 2 years, not Undertale, and it looks like someone else is going to make something very, very similar. Sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself. Let's have a look at Chapter 4's Egg Room as well. True to his schedule, which mentioned windowsills, in Chapter 4 the Egg Room can be found behind one of the windows in the second sanctuary. Normally, it takes us to a different place, which is also pretty interesting, and like in Chapter 1, there's only a small chance that it actually takes us to the real Egg Room. If we luck out though, we find ourselves in what looks like a hospital reception. Another Ruden, identical to the ones in Chapter 3, is the receptionist.
Kris, there you are. The patients are waiting for you.
Yes, I know I'm quite small for a secretary, but knockoffs don't have the right to complain. Going to the left, the only door we can enter is suspiciously labelled with a tree. Entering, we see nothing. No man, no tree, no nothing. But if we explore around a bit, we get some dialogue.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was so into drawing I didn't notice you. Are you here for art club? Right, this is where we draw pictures and don't kill each other.
What am I drawing?
Oh, don't look. I'm not finished yet.
How did I get here?
Can't say I remember. I was in such a rush, I didn't know where I was going at all.
Another dialogue box says, someone seems to be making a painting of a tree. However, strangely, it seems that they haven't drawn the bark yet. To the left, it says, he is behind the tree. And finally, well, there is a man here. Well, he seems to be pointing at something and nodding. Well, there is a canvas here. Will you draw? Kris picked up a pencil. They began by sketching what they had seen behind the tree. But as they sketched, the line began to err, as if the pencil had lost its way. So they started again, drawing over the lines they had already made. Many times, they would suddenly halt, or the pencil drifted into a new drawing. So they started over again. Through many repetitions, their movements became faster and smoother, until without looking, they had completed a sketch in a single, wild line. In the end, as a result of layering the sketches on top of each other, the surface of the canvas was nothing more than a monochrome smear. Next, a tree was painted over it, painted over everything, leaving nothing but a simple still life. After all, there wasn't anything to look at in the room besides a single tree. After that, if we go to wash our hands in the sink, the dialog box informs that a faint grey crease glittered stubbornly between your fingers. You can never wash it all away. Returning to the reception, the Ruden asks how the session went. And which one of you was the patient anyway? And that's all she wrote as far as Chapter 4's Egg Room is concerned. The fact that the Ruden here is of the same type as the ones in Chapter 3's Egg Room is interesting. Since the 7th ace was missing from the Forgotten Island, I think it's a pretty safe bet that this Ruden is that 7th ace. Seeing as the other 6 were lost in the couch at the Dreamer residence, maybe this last ace was lost someplace else that Kris went. Like, I don't know, a hospital? Also, the Ruden pointing out that knockoffs don't have the right to complain implies that they're a knockoff. But a knockoff of whom? Most likely a real secretary, which once again points to the scene being a recreation of something that happened in Kris's actual past. With this in mind, we learn a huge amount about what it is that happened to Kris here. First of all, the context of what's happening clearly seems to be some kind of therapy session. Although the Ruden seems to confuse Kris with the doctor, I believe this therapy session was probably something Kris went to in the past, after whatever happened to them relating to the tree. This is heavily supported by what Kris draws. Kris starts by trying to sketch what they saw behind the tree, but as they go on, the line begins to err. The way it's phrased makes it seem like something within Kris doesn't want to draw what they saw behind the tree. They keep trying over and over again, but the line keeps erring, until nothing but a monochrome smudge is left. And then, as if to cover it all up, they draw a tree on top. To me, this looks like repression symbolism at its finest, eerily similar, and spoiler alert by the way, to what we see in Omori. In that game, the main character represses something intensely traumatic that happened related to a certain tree, and erects all kinds of mental obstacles to prevent themselves from remembering it. Similarly, I think what's happening here is that Kris's mind refuses to draw what they saw behind the tree because it was something intensely traumatic, something they don't want to remember. The tree is probably related to what happened, but it's also a representation of Kris's refusal to face their memories of what happened, choosing to hide them away in obscure places instead. But what did Kris see? Well, technically, I think it's impossible to be sure at this point, but the other patient says something very strange. "Are you here for art club? Right, this is where we draw pictures and don't kill each other." If we take it at face value, this line suggests that Kris, in some way or another, caused someone's death in the past. This is also supported by the dialogue at the sink. You can never wash it all away. I mean, dialogue like that has to mean something. If so, there are a few options for who the victim might be, but the most obvious one at the moment would be Des. I'm not going to explain why, but most of the fanbase agrees that Des is probably the Roaring Knight. And if she is, there's also a good chance that she's either dead or in some state of existence that's different from normal Lightners. Her Dark World form is completely unique compared to any other Lightner we've seen, pitch black, with the ability to change shape and warp to and fro. And that's not even mentioning this sprite. Given what we know about Gerson, the question does arise how she's able to move about in the light world, but there could easily be some explanation for that. On top of this, we also have separate hints that Kris may have had violent tendencies. The secret boss of the Sword Route mentions that, without play, the knife grows dull, seemingly referencing Kris. But to be fair, the way Kris's sketching is phrased doesn't quite align with the theory that they killed someone. Kris drew what they saw behind the tree, after all, not what they did or what happened behind the tree. Therefore, another possibility, which would also be very, very similar to Omori, is that someone, like Des, hung themselves in the tree. But as far as I can tell, we just don't know at this stage. It could be something totally unrelated that we're just not aware of yet. Either way though, I can't help but see the parallels between this new hidden side to Kris and Omori. There's no direct evidence that the tweet I mentioned earlier was directed at that game, but it would have been a reasonable assumption even before Chapter 4 came out. The similarities are all over the place. The setting, the style, the ties to Earthbound, the dream world, real world dichotomy, the protagonists, and now this new Kris arc as well. For more on that, you can read the Substack post I linked in the description if you're interested. One question remains though: who is the Forgotten Man, and what's the deal with the egg? At the moment, I think the most compelling theory is that he was Kris's therapist. After all, he's the one who nods and points Kris to the canvas, and his overall goal seems to be to get Kris to remember something. The fact that he himself has been forgotten repeatedly could be the result of Kris unconsciously repressing the memory of him for fear of remembering what they saw behind the tree by way of association. Alternatively, the Forgotten Man could be directly involved in what happened in some way, but I'm leaning towards the first theory. If we wanted to go a little crazy, I might even be tempted to speculate that the Forgotten Man could be Gaster. I know, Gaster this, Gaster that. But seriously though, if he's a therapist in this world, that would make him pretty similar to a scientist, wouldn't it? And what else do we know about Gaster? He vanished without a trace and was scattered across time and space. Not exactly like being forgotten, but pretty similar. That's just wild speculation though. As for the egg, I'm not too sure. On the surface, it's a simple reference to Easter eggs, and if it has some in-game meaning related to Kris's past, I'm not sure what that would be, so I'd be interested to hear what ideas you have in the comments. In any case, I was actually positively surprised, if that's even possible with Deltarune, at the quality of these new chapters. The game has suddenly taken on a much darker tone, and Toby even threw a Titan at us like it was nothing. So many new threads of theorizing have been opened up to us, from the Knight, to Carol, to the Prophecy, to Kris and their past. So I'm greatly looking forward to seeing where the next chapters are going, and to what the community comes up with in the meantime. For now though, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any theories as to what happened to Kris, since it's possible I missed some crucial information somewhere. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.